The air in the city of Ethelberg was always perfect. A gentle, climate-controlled 72 degrees, with a hint of synthesized pine and damp earth, a scent algorithm designed for maximum civic contentment. Below, the maglev vehicles hummed along their designated pathways, their frictionless glide a perfect metaphor for our lives. Smooth, uninterrupted, safe. I was on the observation deck of the Solaria Tower, 100 floors above the meticulously planned perfection, not to admire the view, but to feel the wind. The real wind. Up here, above the atmospheric regulators, you could feel the raw, untamed currents of the planet. It was the closest thing to chaos our world had left. My name is Elias, and I am a chronoarchivist. I curate the past, the messy, chaotic, and often incomprehensible era of the ancients, the ones who lived before the panacea, the ones who felt pain. I was leaning against a safety barrier, a sheet of transparent, diamond-hard polymer, letting the high-altitude gusts whip my dark hair across my face. It was a sensory indulgence, a small act of rebellion. The pressure of the wind was a tangible force, a reminder of a world that once pushed back. Below, the citizens of Ethelberg moved like schools of fish, a harmonious, flowing ballet of purpose. But their faces, seen even from this height, were serene. Always serene. Then it happened. It wasn't a scream that drew my attention. That's the first thing you must understand. There are no screams in our world. There is no sharp, involuntary cry of terror or agony. There was only a sudden, discordant shape in the sky. A flutter of fabric, a human form, tumbling from the residential spire opposite the Solaria Tower. My mind, conditioned for tranquility, struggled to process the image. It was surreal, like a forgotten dream sequence from an ancient film. The figure, a woman in a flowing, crimson dress, fell with a strange, almost graceful silence. Her limbs were loose, her body a ragdoll surrendering to gravity. She didn't fight. She didn't flail. She just fell. I watched, frozen, my knuckles white against the polymer barrier. The wind roared in my ears, a sound of raw power that felt suddenly predatory. The distance was too great to make out her features, but the crimson of her dress was a slash of violent color against the muted grays and blues of the cityscape. Down below, the flow of people didn't stop. A few heads tilted upwards, their expressions not of horror, but of mild, detached curiosity. It was the look one might give a malfunctioning drone or an unscheduled light show. An anomaly. A data point to be observed and filed away. The impact. I didn't see it, but I felt it. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor through the soles of my shoes. A deep, resonant thud that the city's sound dampeners couldn't completely erase. It was a heavy, final sound. The sound of a life ending. And still, there was no scream. Not from her. Not from the crowd. Within seconds, the automated systems responded. 2 med drones, white, sterile ovals, detached from a nearby building and descended upon the location of the impact with silent, efficient speed. A third, a Civic Harmony drone, emitted a soft, calming chime and projected a holographic notice into the air. Anomaly resolved. Please maintain your designated path. A state of calm is a state of health. The people below obeyed instantly. The few who had paused resumed their forward motion, their placid expressions unaltered. A life had just been extinguished in the most violent way imaginable, and the collective emotional response was less than one would have for a spilled beverage. But I couldn't look away. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a strange, frantic rhythm I wasn't accustomed to. My palms were slick, and a coldness that had nothing to do with the wind crept up my spine. My biomonitor, a subtle implant in my wrist, began to vibrate, a gentle warning that my cortisol levels were rising. Irregular emotional state detected. Recommend deep breathing and a dose of Samia Calm. I ignored it. This wasn't an anomaly. This was a tragedy. I knew the word from the archives. I knew its definition, but I had never understood its weight until this moment. The silence from the street below was more terrifying than any scream could ever have been. It was the silence of a world that had forgotten how to feel, a world that had traded its soul for safety. I watched as the med drones efficiently, clinically enclosed the spot in a privacy screen before presumably sanitizing the scene and removing the body. The crimson fabric was gone. The discord had been erased. The city's perfect rhythm was restored. Everyone else was moving on, but I couldn't. I stayed there, gripping the barrier, my mind replaying the silent, graceful fall. It felt wrong. Not just the death, but the nature of it. The lack of struggle. The serene acceptance. It was as if she hadn't fallen by accident. It was as if she had let go. My gaze drifted back to the residential spire she had fallen from. The open balcony on the 83rd floor was a dark, vacant mouth. An idea, illogical and dangerous, began to form in my mind. I had to know who she was. I had to understand why a person in our perfect world, a world free from all physical suffering, would choose to fall. As I finally turned to leave, my foot brushed against something small and metallic near the edge of the observation deck. I bent down. It wasn't standard city tech. It was small, old, and angular, a data shard, the kind the ancients used. It must have fallen from someone's pocket. But as I picked it up, I saw a single, freshly etched symbol on its casing. It was a crude drawing of a bird with a broken wing. The same symbol was tattooed on the wrist of the woman I had just seen on a news feed, a brief memorial piece before the story was buried. Her name was Lyra. The shard had been hers. She must have been up here, right before she... My biomonitor buzzed again, more insistently this time. But it wasn't the alert that made me catch my breath. It was the realization that this shard wasn't just a random piece of data. It was a message, a final, desperate whisper from a woman who had just plunged into the ultimate silence. And now it was in my hand. What secret did she die to protect, or perhaps to share? The Chrono Archives were housed in the city's core, a vast, subterranean library of the human experience. It was my sanctuary, a place of quiet reverence. Most citizens found it morbid. They saw no value in studying the great suffering, the millennia of human history defined by war, famine, disease, and pain. Why dwell on horrors that have been so perfectly eradicated? For them, history began with the panacea, the universal nanite treatment that 3 centuries ago had rewritten our biology. It didn't just block pain receptors. It actively repaired tissue at an accelerated rate. A broken bone would mend in hours. A deep cut would seal in minutes. The very concept of physical agony was relegated to a historical footnote, an abstract horror like the mythical dragons of old. My job was to be the keeper of those footnotes. I spent my days immersed in the sensory data of the past, holographic recordings, digitized literature, audio logs filled with sounds our world had forgotten. Weeping, wailing, the sharp intake of breath before a blow, the low moan of chronic illness. To my colleagues, it was just data, a catalog of aberrant neural signals. To me, it was a ghost limb, an ache for something I'd never had. This morning, the silence of the archives felt different. It felt heavier, echoing the terrible silence of Lyra's fall. I bypassed my usual morning review of 14th century plagues and went straight to my private terminal. The shard Lyra had dropped was an old model, but its interface was compatible with my archival equipment. My fingers trembled as I slid it into the reader. I felt like a trespasser, a voyeur prying into a dead woman's soul. But the image of her silent descent haunted me. I had to understand. The shard contained a single, encrypted file. It took me an hour to bypass the primitive but elegant security key. When it finally opened, it wasn't a suicide note or a political manifesto. It was a personal video log. Lyra's face filled my screen. She was beautiful, but not in the serene, placid way of the people in Ethelberg. Her eyes, a deep, stormy gray, held a restless energy. Her mouth was set in a line that hinted at a constant, low-level tension. She was in her apartment, the same one I'd seen on the news feed, with the city's perfect skyline glittering behind her. Log entry. I don't know. 67? 100? She began, her voice a low, melodic hum that felt strangely intimate. I went to the clinic today for my quarterly checkup. You know the drill. A bitter smile touched her lips. The medtech, a pleasant-faced drone of a man, ran the deep tissue scanner over my arm. He pointed to the monitor. See that, Lyra? A microfracture in your ulna. Must have knocked it against something. Don't worry, the nanites have already knitted it back together. Good as new. She looked away from her own recording device, toward her window. I didn't even know. I hit my arm on a doorframe yesterday. I remember the impact, the pressure. But that's all it was. Data. Information. My body registered a collision. It didn't register an injury. There was no flash of hot, white warning. No throbbing reminder to be more careful next time. I am so disconnected. She turned back, her eyes boring into the lens, into me. Elias, my friend, my only friend in this, tells me I think too much. Kale says I should be grateful. Grateful that we will never feel the agony of a broken bone, the fire of a burn, the gnawing terror of a terminal disease. And I am. Intellectually, I understand the gift of the panacea. Our ancestors prayed for this relief. They endured horrors we can only read about. They died screaming for a mercy we take for granted. My breath hitched. Kale. She knew my Kale. My best friend. The rock of pragmatic logic in my life. He had never mentioned a Lyra. Why? But what did we trade for it? Lyra continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. We have amputated a part of our humanity. Pain, I've read in the archives, was a signal. It was the body's alarm bell. It taught us our limits. It taught us caution. It taught us empathy. How can you truly understand what it means to hurt someone when you have no memory of what hurt feels like? She held up a hand, showing the camera a perfectly smooth, unblemished palm. I was cooking last week. The heat coil on the stove malfunctioned, glowing red-hot. I reached for a pan, and my hand brushed right against it. The nanites in my skin sent an alert to my biomonitor, and I pulled back. My skin was seared. For a few seconds, I could see the flesh charring. And I felt nothing, just a mild warmth. The nanites repaired it in under a minute. There isn't even a scar. She closed her hand into a fist. I should have a scar. I should have a memory branded into my skin that says, fire is dangerous. Be careful. But I don't. All I have is a data log of the event. My life is becoming a series of data logs, and I'm just the administrator. I'm not the one living it. The log ended there. I sat back, the sterile air of the archives feeling suffocating. She had put into words the formless unease that had plagued me for years. We were living in a museum of life, curators of our own bodies, but never truly inhabiting them. We were ghosts in our own flesh. I thought of the day Kale and I were children, playing near the construction site of the new hydro plant. He had slipped from a beam, falling 20 feet onto a pile of plastic steel girders. I remember the sound, a sickening crunch. He had sat up, looked at his leg, which was bent at an angle that defied nature, and said, that's not right. Then he waited patiently for the med drones. There was no crying, no shock, just a calm assessment of a mechanical failure. At the time, I had admired his composure. Now, I saw it as a terrifying symptom of our collective disease. The world outside my archive was a paradise built on a profound lie. We hadn't eliminated suffering. We had just eliminated the ability to perceive it. The injuries still happened. The diseases still occurred, though they were instantly fought by nanites. The potential for tragedy was everywhere, but we had all been rendered numb, unable to read the signs. Lyra's fall wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom, a scream that no one was equipped to hear. I needed to talk to Kale. He was a structural engineer, a man who believed in physics, logic, and the unassailable good of the system. He had known Lyra. He had kept her secret. His name in her log was a breadcrumb, and I had to follow it. I shut down the terminal. The image of Lyra's restless, intelligent eyes burned into my mind. She had been searching for something, an answer, a feeling, and in her search, she had found a reason to step off a balcony. I had to know what that reason was, because suddenly my quiet, academic dissatisfaction with our world had crystallized into something sharp and urgent. A fear that Lyra hadn't been the first, and that if I didn't understand why she did it, she wouldn't be the last. Was this search for feeling a kind of madness? Or was it the only sane response to a world that had gone completely numb? The dream was always the same. I'm running through a forest from the archives, a temperate rainforest from the 21st century. The air is thick with the smell of wet soil and decay. It's not the clean, synthesized scent from the city regulators. It's rich, complex, and overwhelmingly real. A branch whips across my face, and in the dream, I feel a sharp, stinging line of fire erupt on my cheek. It shocks me. It hurts. And the pain is so exquisitely, terrifyingly alive. I wake up with my hand on my face, my biomonitor buzzing softly, my heart pounding with the ghost of sensation I have never truly felt. These dreams began long before I saw Lyra fall, long before I held her data shard. They're the reason I became a chronoarchivist. I'm haunted by the idea of pain, not as a horror, but as a missing piece of the human puzzle. Our world is a grand, beautiful equation that has been solved, balanced, and perfected. But I have always felt that the architects, in their infinite wisdom, rounded off a crucial, irrational number. And the result is an answer that is technically correct, but fundamentally wrong. My fear is that I am broken, that my fascination with the ancient suffering is a perversion, a malfunction in my own mental code. The Ministry of Stability has programs for this. Sensory deviation therapy, they call it. Gentle neural recalibration to smooth out the undesirable wrinkles in one's psyche. Kale has suggested it to me in the kindest, most logical way possible. You read too much of that old data, Elias, he'd say, placing a hand on my shoulder. It's like eating spoiled food. It's bound to upset your system. But Lyra's log had been a revelation. I wasn't alone. She felt it too, this profound sense of disconnection. She was my fellow ghost, haunting the same pristine, passionless machine. Listening to her voice, I felt a strange, protective surge. It was more than just intellectual agreement. It was a resonance, a feeling of kinship so strong it bordered on something more. Something the ancients called grief. A sorrow for a person I never knew, but whose soul I felt I recognized. I found Kale at the sky docks, overseeing the installation of a new magnetic conduit. He stood with his feet planted wide, his solid frame silhouetted against the pale afternoon sky, the very picture of confidence and competence. He greeted me with a warm, easy smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. No one's smile ever did. Elias. Slumming it up here in the real world, he joked, clapping me on the back. The impact was solid, friendly. Had he used even 10% more force, he might have fractured my scapula. Neither of us would have known until a drone told us. I need to talk to you, Kale, I said, my voice lower than I intended. His smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of clinical concern. Your vitals are elevated. Are you feeling dissonant? I'm feeling human, I retorted, the word sharper than I meant. I found something, or someone. Lyra. The name hung in the air between us. For a fraction of a second, I saw something flicker in Kale's eyes. A glitch in the placid code. It wasn't shock. It wasn't sadness. It was annoyance? Evasion? Then it was gone, his face smoothing back into its usual mask of calm logic. Lyra, he said, the name suddenly tasting like a foreign word in his mouth. Ah, yes. A tragic system failure. Her biomonitor should have flagged her psychological decline. It's a flaw in the network. Don't talk about her like she was a faulty server, I snapped. My own biomonitor began to vibrate. Conflict state detected. Lower vocal tone. Adopt a non-confrontational posture. Kale held up his hands. All right, Elias. Calm. I know you get attached to your historical narratives. But Lyra was unstable. She had a morbid fixation, just like you. She refused recalibration therapy. She was a friend. I tried to help her see reason, to accept the peace we've been given. She didn't see it as peace, Kale. She saw it as a cage. She told me. Told you. Kale's brow furrowed. How? She's dead. I hesitated, then pulled the shard from my pocket. She left this. A video log. She mentioned you. She said you were a friend. Kale stared at the shard, as if it were a venomous insect. He wouldn't meet my eyes. She was difficult. She wanted to feel things. Not just happiness or contentment, but everything. The full, messy spectrum. She read the same things you do, Elias. She romanticized the chaos of the past. She thought pain gave life meaning. He finally looked at me, and his expression was one of genuine, paternalistic pity. That's not meaning. That's madness. Is it? I challenged, my voice trembling. Or is it madness to walk through life so numb that you can watch someone die and feel nothing but curiosity? Is it madness to break a bone and not know it? To burn your own skin and register it as a minor temperature alert? We're not living, Kale. We're existing. We're beautifully maintained machines, and our souls are rusting. The accusation struck a nerve. Kale's jaw tightened. My soul is not rusting. I contribute. I build things that make life better, safer. I ensure the structural integrity of this city so that people can live without fear. What do? You sit in a basement and fetishize the misery of dead people. Lyra was the same. She wasn't a poet, Elias. She was a bug in the code. And now, she's been deleted. The coldness of his words hit me harder than any physical blow could. Deleted. That's all she was to him. A problem solved. The friend Lyra had spoken of was a lie, or a misinterpretation. Kale hadn't been her friend. He had been her warden, trying to shepherd her back into the sterile flock. I turned away from him, the gulf between us suddenly an impassable chasm. He saw my obsession as a sickness, but I was beginning to see his health as the true disease. Apathy disguised as peace. She was trying to find something, I said, more to myself than to him. In her last log, she talked about a place, a myth, the echo chamber, a place where the panacea's effects were weaker, where you could still feel the ghosts of sensation. Kale let out a short, humorless laugh. An urban legend, Elias. A fairy tale for the dissonant. It doesn't exist. It's a coping mechanism for people who can't accept paradise. Forget about it. Forget about Lyra. For your own good. He placed his hand on my shoulder again, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like a restraint. I shrugged it off. His advice, his logic, his entire worldview felt alien to me now. Lyra's death had been a stone thrown into the placid pond of my life, and the ripples were spreading, revealing a depth I never knew was there. My fear of being broken was warring with a new, more terrifying fear, that the world was broken, and I was the only one who noticed. I walked away from Kale, leaving him standing there against the sky, a perfect citizen in a perfect world. His words echoed my mind. It doesn't exist. But the denial in his eyes told a different story. He knew more than he was saying. The echo chamber. A fairy tale? Or was it the very place Lyra had been looking for? The place she had perhaps found, leading her to that final, silent leap? My path was clear now. My inner conflict was resolving. Not into peace, but into purpose. I had to find it. I had to chase the ghost that had haunted both Lyra and me. I looked at the data shard in my hand. It was more than a log now. It was a map, and I was afraid that it might lead me to a place where I would have to face more than just dreams of pain. What if it led me to the real thing? The search for the echo chamber began in the only place it could, the deep archives, the digital catacombs where the city's forgotten data went to die. Kale's denial was a confirmation. If a man like him, a pillar of the establishment, knew of the fairy tale, then it had a basis in reality, however faint. Lyra's logs were my guide. She spoke of glitches in the Panacea network, sensory dead zones, and anomalous resonance frequencies. They were the ravings of a madwoman to Kale, but to an archivist, they were keywords. For weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was Elias, the quiet, diligent chronoarchivist. By night, I descended into a clandestine world of encrypted networks and suppressed municipal data. I cross-referenced Lyra's esoteric notes with old city schematics and maintenance logs for the Panacea's nanite distribution system. The Panacea wasn't a single event. It was a continuous, self-replicating process. A quadrillion microscopic machines in our bodies, our water, our air, all communicating, all working to uphold the great calm. But any network, no matter how perfect, can have dropped signals. I found it in a confluence of anomalies. An old, decommissioned geothermal vent deep beneath the city's industrial sector. The area was scheduled for demolition for centuries, but always postponed. Maintenance logs showed the nanite concentration in that zone was inexplicably and persistently low. The official reason was unusual magnetic interference. It was a lie. I could feel it. This was Lyra's destination. Getting there was the first trial. The sector was off-limits, a maze of rusting metal and silent, automated factories from a bygone era of production. The air was unfiltered, thick with the metallic tang of corrosion and the chemical scent of decay. My biomonitor pulsed a constant, low-level warning about particulate matter. I ignored it. For the first time, I was breathing the city's truth. I found the entrance to the geothermal vent behind a corroded panel, marked with a symbol so faded it was almost invisible. The same broken-winged bird from Lyra's shard. My heart hammered. This was it. The air that flowed out was warm and strangely vibrant, carrying faint, complex scents my synthesized world had never prepared me for. The descent was terrifying. The ladder was old, its rungs slick with moisture. I was clumsy. In my world, clumsiness had no immediate consequences. Halfway down, my foot slipped. I fell only a few feet, but my side slammed hard against a thick pipe. I registered the pressure, the blunt force of the impact. I automatically checked myself for visible damage, saw none, and continued on, the event already filed away as trivial. The vent opened into a vast cavern, a cathedral of geology and abandoned technology. Pipes, thick as an ancient oak tree, crisscrossed the space, glowing with a faint, residual heat. In the center of the cavern, a deep pool of water shimmered, fed by a hot spring from deep within the earth. The air was humid alive. It was the echo chamber, but it was empty. There was no secret society, no cabal of fellow feelers. There was just rock, water, and silence. Disappointment washed over me, cold and heavy. Had I been chasing a ghost, a fantasy born of my own longing? Then I saw it. Scratched into the rock face near the pool were names. Dozens of them. And dates. The most recent was Lyra's. This wasn't a meeting place. It was a pilgrimage site. I approached the pool. The water was unnaturally clear. The low nanite count, the unique mineral composition. Lyra's theory was that this place acted as a sensory amplifier. It didn't negate the panacea, but it created a state of such intense, raw sensory input that one could almost remember. I had to know. I took off my tunic and my shoes, my movements slow, deliberate, ritualistic. I was terrified, not of drowning, not of the unknown. I was terrified of what I might feel, or what I might not. What if, even here, I was still numb? That, I realized, would be the true tragedy. I stepped into the water. It was hot, hotter than any temperature-regulated bath. It was a shock, a wave of pure thermal energy that made my skin prickle. It wasn't pain. Not yet. But it was more. A sensation so loud it was almost a noise. I waded deeper, the heat enveloping me, my biomonitor buzzing frantically on the rock where I'd left it. I submerged myself completely. The silence of the water was different from the silence of the city. It was a dense, living silence, the pressure a constant, firm embrace. I opened my eyes. The mineral-rich water stung. Stung. It was a sharp, irritating sensation, an aggressive discomfort that made me want to squeeze my eyes shut. I forced them to stay open. It was the first unsolicited, unpleasant physical sensation I had felt in my entire life. And it was glorious. I surfaced, gasping, the hot air a new shock against my wet skin. I was trembling, not from cold, but from sheer sensory overload. The stinging in my eyes, the intense heat on my skin, the pressure of the water. It was a symphony of feeling, crude and overwhelming. I remember my fall down the ladder, the impact against my side. Now, in this heightened state, I could feel a new sensation there. A deep, throbbing pressure. A dull, persistent something. It wasn't the searing fire of my dreams, but it was a clear, undeniable signal from my own body. A complaint. An injury. I ran my hand over my ribs. When I pressed a specific spot, the throbbing intensified, blooming into a sharper, more focused point of discomfort. I had broken a rib. The nanites were already working, of course, knitting the bone, but here, in the echo chamber, their anesthetic properties were dampened. I could feel the process. I could feel my own body healing. I laughed. A real, raw, breathless laugh that echoed through the cavern. It was a sound of discovery, of triumph. I pushed on the rib again, harder, and flinched. I actually physically flinched away from the sensation. My own body had told me to stop, and I had listened, not because a monitor told me to, but because it hurt. This is what Lyra had found. This echo of a forgotten language. But it also raised a terrifying question. If this small taste of reality was so overwhelming, so powerful, why wasn't it enough for her? She had found this place. She had felt this. And still, she had chosen to step from that balcony. My elation began to curdle into dread. Perhaps this wasn't the answer she was looking for. Perhaps this was just another clue, pointing towards a truth far more profound and far more dangerous. The echo chamber wasn't the destination. It was a doorway. As I pulled myself from the water, my body alive with a constellation of new, strange sensations, I saw something else carved into the rock, almost hidden beneath Lyra's name. It wasn't another name. It was a phrase written in her familiar, sharp script. The pain is not gone. It is only collected. What could it possibly mean? Collected where? And by whom? The phrase, the pain is not gone. It is only collected, became an obsession. It was a splinter in my mind, and unlike the new, dull ache in my ribs, this one didn't fade. It burrowed deeper. Lyra's pilgrimage to the echo chamber wasn't about experiencing a ghost of pain for herself. It was about understanding its absence on a grander scale. She had discovered that pain hadn't been destroyed. It had been moved, redirected. But where? My research took a darker, more paranoid turn. I began investigating the architects of the panacea, the quasi-mythical figures from 3 centuries ago who had gifted us our placid existence. Most were just names in a history file, but one name kept reappearing in the highest level, most encrypted design documents, Dr. Thorne. He was celebrated as the lead bioethicist on the project. The man who ensured the panacea was a gift, not a curse. According to the official records, he died peacefully 250 years ago. But I found a discrepancy. A single, buried maintenance log for a private, high-security server farm dated last week. The authorization code belonged to one Dr. Thorne. A man cannot authorize server maintenance if he has been dead for 2.5 centuries. The server farm was located in the oldest part of the city, disguised as a data purity center. It was a fortress. Getting inside legally was impossible. So I used the skills I had honed breaking into the city's archives. I cloned the access credentials of a low-level maintenance worker, altered my public identification profile, and walked in through the front door, my heart a frantic drum against my newly sensitive ribs. The interior was cold, sterile, and silent. Rows upon rows of black, humming servers stretched into the gloom, their indicator lights blinking like a galaxy of captive stars. It felt like a mausoleum. Following the server architecture, I traced the highest bandwidth data stream to a central chamber, sealed by a biometric lock. There was no way to forge that. I was about to give up when a voice, dry and ancient as dust, spoke from an unseen speaker. You are not the maintenance worker. His cortisol levels never exceed the baseline. Yours are astronomical. You must be Elias. The voice sent a jolt through me. A primal fear I was only just beginning to learn the name for. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Sitting in a Spartan chair in the center of the chamber was a man. He was impossibly old, his skin a translucent parchment stretched over a fragile frame. He was kept alive by a web of delicate, glowing wires and nutrient tubes, a living fossil tethered to a machine. But his eyes were bright, sharp, and achingly intelligent. They were the eyes of a man who had seen 300 years of history unfold. Dr. Thorne. I breathed, the name feeling like a blasphemy. In the flesh, so to speak, he rasped a faint, rustling sound. Please come in. I've been expecting you, or someone like you, ever since Lyra. He gestured with a withered hand towards the central server, a colossal black monolith that pulsed with a soft, internal light. You came seeking answers. About the panacea. About what we did. You read the words Lyra left for you. The pain is not gone. It is only collected. A very astute observation. She was brilliant. Too brilliant for her own good. My mind was reeling. What is this place? What is this machine? This, Thorne said, his voice imbued with a weight of ages, is not a server farm. It is a reservoir. A library. You are a chronoarchivist, Elias. You collect the idea of the past. I collect the reality. He tapped a command into the console built into his chair. A holographic display shimmered into existence above the monolith. It was a real-time neurological map of Ethelberg. 1,000,000 points of light, each representing a citizen. The panacea was my life's work, Thorne explained, his voice a low confession. We saw a world tearing itself apart with agony. War, disease, hatred, all of it rooted in or amplified by physical and emotional pain. We believed if we could cut the root, the poisonous tree would wither. We designed the nanites to intercept and neutralize the specific neural cascade that creates the sensation of pain. But you didn't neutralize it, I whispered, finally understanding. You redirected it. Precisely, Thorne confirmed. We couldn't simply delete the signal. It is a fundamental part of the human biological and psychological operating system. Erasing it would have caused a catastrophic collapse of the entire structure. So, we gave it somewhere else to go. We created a receiver. A sympathetic quantum-entangled matrix that would absorb the redirected signals from every man, woman, and child connected to the Panacea network. He looked up at the monolith, his expression a mixture of pride and profound horror. You are looking at it, Elias. You're looking at 300 years of every stubbed toe, every broken bone, every cancerous cell, every childbirth, every burn, every last agonizing death throe of an entire civilization. We didn't eliminate pain. We contained it. This machine, it feels it all. I stared at the humming black server, and my perception of it shifted. It wasn't a machine anymore. It was a living entity, a god of agony, silently screaming in a prison of circuits and code. Every tiny, unfelt injury in the city, every momentary spike of what should have been suffering was being piped here. Collected. But why? I asked, my voice trembling. Why keep you alive? Why maintain this place? Because the system requires a keeper, Thorne said, his bright eyes dimming with a terrible sadness. An administrator. The matrix is not perfect. It requires constant calibration, and it had an unforeseen side effect, a consequence we never anticipated. He looked at me, his gaze penetrating, searching. By removing pain, we removed its counterpoint. We diluted joy. We blunted love. We flattened the entire emotional landscape. Do you know what the greatest joys of the ancients were, Elias? Relief from pain. The reunion after a feared loss. The courage found in the face of fear. By removing the valleys, we have lowered all the mountains to mere hills. Humanity is not living in peace. It is living in a state of perpetual, mild contentment. And it is dying of it. Dying. Our birth rates have been in steady decline for a century, Thorne stated, his voice flat and clinical. There is no passion, no desperate, aching drive to connect, to create, to continue. There is no great art, no revolutionary science. We have created a utopia of apathy, a slow, comfortable, gentle extinction. Lyra understood this. She felt the quiet fade, as I call it. She came to me, just as you have. I showed her this. I showed her the truth. And it killed her, I said, the realization a cold stone in my gut. No, Thorne corrected softly. It gave her a choice. You see, the matrix, the reservoir, it can be reversed. The signals can be sent back. The collection can be returned to its owners. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. But to do that, one would need a catalyst, a proof of concept. Someone would have to be the first to reconnect, to willingly take back their own pain, and in doing so, prove that the system could be safely dismantled. I offered her that choice, the chance to be the first. My blood ran cold. And she refused? No, Elias, Thorne said, his ancient eyes locking onto mine. She accepted, but she believed she was not strong enough to be the first. She believed the shock would destroy her. So she did the only thing she could think of to force our hand. She created a mystery so profound that someone else, someone stronger, would be compelled to solve it. She didn't fall because she was in despair. She fell so that you would find her shard. She died so that you would find me. A chilling silence filled the room, broken only by the low hum of the monolith, the silent scream of a billion unfelt agonies. Lyra hadn't taken her own life. She had sacrificed it. For me. For a chance to undo the greatest mistake in human history. And then Dr. Thorne asked the question that I knew was coming, the question my entire life had been leading up to. She chose you, Elias. Now, I'm offering you the same choice. Would you be the one? Would you be the first to truly feel again? The air in the chamber grew thick, heavy with the unspoken suffering of the monolith. Thorne's question hung between us, not as a hypothetical, but as a loaded weapon. Would you be the first to truly feel again? It was the question my soul had been screaming in its sleep for years, and I was terrified of the answer. How? I managed to whisper, my throat dry. How is it possible? Thorne gestured to a small, sterile alcove I hadn't noticed before. The architects of the Panacea were not fools. We built in a failsafe, a backdoor. We called it the Prometheus Protocol. It's a targeted retrovirus, keyed to an individual's unique genetic signature. It wouldn't just disable the Panacea in your system. It would reattune your neurons to their original primal state. It would force your brain to remember the language it has forgotten. His eyes held a grim warning. But it would be a flood, Elias, not a trickle. 3 decades of your life's unfelt injuries, illnesses, and emotional shocks, all hitting your consciousness at once. Every bump, every scrape, every micro-illness your nanites fought off, every moment of what should have been fear or grief. The cumulative psychic weight could shatter a mind. I looked from the old man, a prisoner of his own creation, to the terrible, humming monolith. I thought of Lyra, her calculated fall, her faith in a stranger. She had deemed herself too fragile, but she had seen something in me. A strength? Or just a shared madness? Why me? I asked. Why not you? You've lived with this truth for centuries. A sad, weary smile touched Thorne's lips. My body is too frail, my own connection to the Panacea, too ancient and interwoven with this life support system. To disconnect me would be to kill me instantly. And for 200 years, I found no one else. No one who questioned. No one who felt the dissonance. People were content. Then came Lyra. And then you. You're the first generation to grow up so deep in the quiet fade that some of you are beginning to feel its absence as a presence. You are humanity's immune response to its own cure. A choice. A real choice with unimaginable consequences. To remain in the comfortable, gray twilight of my existence, or to step into a world of blinding light and scorching shadow. To be the test case for humanity's salvation or its damnation. What if it destroyed me? What if I was not the savior Lyra imagined, but just another broken man? I need to think, I stammered, backing away from the alcove. The thought of that needle, that Prometheus protocol, filled me with a primal dread that was in itself a more powerful emotion than I was used to. There is no time, a new voice said. The voice was calm, familiar, and utterly chilling. The door to the chamber slid open. Kale stood there, flanked by 2 tall, impassive figures in the sterile white uniforms of the Ministry of Stability. Their faces were blank, their eyes holding the serene emptiness of the truly untroubled. My blood ran cold. Kale looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a genuine emotion on his face. It wasn't anger. It was a profound, unshakable disappointment. I was worried about you, Elias. Your behavior has been erratic. Your biosignals are a mess. I followed you. When you bypassed security here, I had no choice but to report a level 1 cognitive breach. He looked past me at Dr. Thorne, his expression shifting to one of mild confusion, as if looking at a historical anomaly that didn't fit the data. I don't know who this is or what this place is, but it's clearly an unsanctioned and dangerous influence. Kale, listen to me, I pleaded, my voice cracking with an urgency he couldn't comprehend. This isn't what you think. This is everything. The reason we are the way we are. The reason Lyra. Stop talking about Lyra, Kale said, his voice flat. She was sick, and you, my friend, are sick. But you can be helped. The Ministry enforcers will take you for deep recalibration. They'll fix the damage all this morbid history has done to you. Betrayal. The word slammed into me. In the archives, I had read of it. A knife in the back from a trusted hand. But the definition was a pale, academic thing. The reality was this hollow, sickening plunge in my gut. My best friend, the man I had grown up with, was handing me over to be mentally laundered to have the very core of my identity, my doubts, and my longings smoothed away into nothing. He was doing it, in his mind, out of love, out of a desire to fix me, and that made it 1,000 times worse. Dr. Thorne watched the scene unfold with an ancient, weary resignation. So it comes to this, the shepherds protecting their flock from the truth. The two enforcers took a step forward, their movements synchronized and silent. They reached for my arms. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. This was it. They would take me, wipe my mind clean, and the truth would die here with Thorne. Lyra's sacrifice would be for nothing. The world would continue its slow, gentle slide into oblivion. The choice is still yours, Elias. Thorne's voice cut through my fear. But you must make it now. He tapped another command on his console. The Prometheus protocol, alcove, lit up. A single syringe of opalescent fluid rising from a slot, bathed in a soft, clinical light. The enforcers paused, their programming dictating they assess the new variable. Kale stared at the syringe, his brow furrowed in confusion. What is that? Kale asked. Salvation, Thorne rasped. Or a terrible, terrible mistake. My heart was a wild drum. My mind was a vortex of fear and a desperate, defiant hope. I looked at Kale's face, the face of my friend, the face of the world I was trying to save, a world that would hate me for it. I looked at the syringe, the promise of fire and agony and life. And I looked at the impassive enforcers, their hands reaching for me, ready to drag me back into the silent, comfortable darkness. The crisis was here, the turning point for me, and perhaps for everyone. My quiet life of archival dust and whispered doubts was over. Whatever I did next would not be a thought or a theory. It would be an action felt across the world. Do I surrender to the peace of blissful ignorance? Or do I embrace the damnation of knowing? The enforcers took another step. Their hands were inches from my arms. I had only a second to decide. The world slowed down. The hum of the monolith, the soft whir of Thorne's life support, the almost imperceptible sound of the enforcer's breath. It all faded into a dull, distant roar. All that remained was the space between me and the syringe. A chasm of choice. My mind, a frantic loom, wove together the threads of my life. The silent fall of Lyra's crimson dress. The stinging heat of the water in the echo chamber. The dull ache in my ribs, a secret promise of reality. The pity in Kale's eyes. The crushing weight of Thorne's 300-year vigil. These were not just memories anymore. They were arguments in a debate for the soul of humanity. Kale's voice broke the spell. Elias, don't be a fool. Step away from that. Whatever it is, it's not the answer. The answer is stability. The answer is calm. His words, meant to be a lifeline, felt like the bars of a cage. He was offering me peace. The same empty, sterile peace that had driven Lyra to the edge of a building. The same peace that was slowly erasing our species. He was offering me a return to the dream when I had just woken up. I looked at him, my best friend, my betrayer. I saw the genuine concern etched on his face, a shallow carving on a smooth stone. He loved me, in his way. He wanted to save me from myself. But he couldn't see that the self he wanted to save was a ghost, a pale imitation. To save me was to destroy me. This isn't for me, Kale, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It's for you. His face registered confusion. The enforcers, their programming momentarily stalled by the standoff, waited for a clear directive. It was all the time I needed. I lunged. Not towards the enforcers, not towards the exit. I lunged for the alcove. My hand closed around the syringe. It was cool to the touch, the glass smooth and perfect. The opalescent fluid within seemed to swirl with a life of its own. This was it. The concentrated essence of a forgotten world. The key to unlocking my own body. Elias, no? Cale shouted, his voice for the first time laced with something that bordered on panic. He finally understood this was not a debate. The enforcers moved, their speed inhuman. But my desperation was a fuel they had no concept of. I didn't try to run. There was nowhere to run. I turned, my back against the console of the Prometheus protocol, the syringe held tight in my fist. I was cornered, a rat in a trap of my own discovery. Dr. Thorne watched me, his ancient eyes wide, holding the breath of centuries. He had brought me to the water. He could not make me drink. The choice was no longer abstract. It was this moment. Do I have the right, the arrogance, to make a decision that could, if Thorne was right, eventually unleash a tidal wave of suffering upon a world that doesn't even know it's missing? To reintroduce agony, disease, and heartbreak into a paradise, however flawed? I thought of the art in the archives. The paintings of the ancients streaked with grief and rage. The music soaring with a joy born from sorrow, a beauty I could only ever analyze, never feel. I thought of what it would be to truly love someone with the desperate, terrifying knowledge that you could lose them, that they could be hurt. That knowledge would be an agony. But wouldn't the love itself be infinitely more real? We are not gods. We have no right to choose a painless existence if it means we cease to be human. We were meant to be flawed, fragile, and breakable. That is where our strength, our compassion, and our art comes from. We have been living in a beautiful, gilded cage forgetting the sky. Lyra didn't die for me to stand here and hesitate. She died believing I would be brave enough to break the lock. "I'm sorry, Cale," I whispered. Then I plunged a needle into my thigh. The enforcers were on me in an instant. A hand, strong and impersonal, clamped down on my shoulder. Another grabbed the arm, holding the now empty syringe. But it was too late. The retrovirus was in my bloodstream. The Prometheus protocol was initiated. Cale stared at me, his face a mask of horror and disbelief. "What have you done?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Something was happening. It didn't begin with a bang. It began with a hum. A low-frequency vibration starting in my bones, spreading outwards. It was the sound of 1,000,000,000 nanites powering down, their 300-year-old directive suddenly overridden. It was the sound of my own body's long-dormant systems rebooting. The first sensation was small. A forgotten injury from my childhood, a deep bruise on my shin from falling off a hover ledge. The nanites had healed it instantly, but the memory of the impact, the cellular trauma, was still there, stored in the phantom limb of my nervous system. Now, the signal blocked for decades found its path. A dull, throbbing ache bloomed on my leg, real and insistent. Then another. The burn from the stove Lyra had described, but my own version, a time I'd grabbed a superheated conduit on a dare. A phantom fire raced across my palm. The sensations were overlapping, a cacophony of ghosts, all screaming for attention at once. The enforcer holding my shoulder was gripping me too tightly. Before, I would have registered the pressure. Now, I felt a sharp, grinding agony as his fingers dug into the muscle and bone. A cry, hoarse and involuntary, ripped from my throat. It was a shocking, ugly sound. My first scream. It startled everyone. The enforcers loosened their grip, their programming unable to process the auditory anomaly. Cale took a step back, his eyes wide with a fear he didn't understand. And then the floodgates broke. Every unfelt wound, every muted sorrow, every suppressed fear of my 30 years of life came rushing back. The ache in my ribs from the fall in the tunnel became a sharp, stabbing fire with every breath. The memory of my mother's decommissioning, her placid, quiet end in a sterile white room, which I had processed as a logical conclusion to her life cycle, now crashed into me as a wave of gut-wrenching, soul-tearing grief. Tears, hot and real, streamed down my face. I sobbed, my body convulsing with a lifetime of unshed sorrow. I collapsed to my knees, overwhelmed, drowning in the tidal wave of sensation and emotion. It was agony. It was unbearable. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. And through it all, beneath the pain and the grief, a single, clear, triumphant thought emerged. I am alive. I looked up through my tears at Kale, at the enforcers at the sterile, silent world I had just declared war on. I had made my choice. I had eaten the apple. And now, the gates of Eden were closing behind me forever. The chamber was a vortex of sensation. The cold, sterile floor beneath my knees was a shock of pure temperature. The recycled air, once neutral, now carried 1,000 distinct smells. The ozone from the servers, the metallic tang of the enforcers' uniforms, the faint, dusty scent of Dr. Thorne's ancient body. My senses, silenced since birth, were now screaming at full volume. It was a symphony from hell, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. The physical pain was a roaring fire. My ribs, the old bruise on my shin, the crushing grip on my shoulder. They were all distinct points of agony, a constellation of suffering that mapped my body's hidden history. But it was the emotional pain that truly broke me. The grief for my mother, the sorrow for Lyra, the profound, aching loneliness I had carried my whole life but never had a name for. It all crashed down. I was on my hands and knees, weeping, not with the quiet, dignified tears of archival films, but with ugly, heaving sobs that tore through me, leaving me breathless and hollow. Kale and the enforcers were paralyzed. They were watching a man from another species. I was a data error made flesh, a walking, screaming paradox. In their world of serene logic, my raw, messy breakdown was an event beyond comprehension. He is malfunctioning. One of the enforcers stated, his voice a flat line of analytical detachment. Dr. Thorne's voice, frail but clear, cut through the tension. He is not malfunctioning. He is functioning for the first time. This is what you have forgotten. This is humanity. I pushed myself up, my limbs trembling. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through my body, but I forced myself to stand. I had to face them. I had to face my friend. I looked at Kale. His face, usually a mask of calm competence, was now a canvas of utter confusion. He saw my tears, my contorted expression of pain, the raw animal sounds coming from my throat, and his mind, his perfect, logical, painless mind, could not compute. It was like showing a two-dimensional being a sphere. Kale, I gasped, my voice broken. The simple act of speaking hurt, my throat raw from my first scream. This is grief. This is what it feels like to lose someone. I miss my mother. I miss Lyra. The names, spoken with the true weight of sorrow, seemed to hang in the air like physical things. This, I said, clutching my side where my ribs screamed in protest, is pain. It's a warning. It's a teacher. It's the price of having a body that can be broken. I took a staggering step toward him. The enforcers tensed, but Kale held up a hand, stopping them. He was no longer seeing a threat. He was seeing an unsolvable puzzle. What? Kale whispered, his voice barely audible. Why would anyone choose this? And in that moment, I understood the true depth of the chasm between us. He wasn't asking about the pain. He was asking about the choice. To willingly embrace imperfection, to choose suffering. It was the ultimate heresy against the religion of comfort. Because the alternative, I said, looking him straight in the eye, is nothing. We live in a beautiful, warm, comfortable tomb, Kale. We feel no pain, but we feel no real joy either. We don't love with desperation. We don't create with urgency. We don't live with the fierce, brilliant, terrifying light of knowing that it can all be taken away. We are fading. We are forgetting how to be human. Lyra knew it, and now I know it. My words were not a logical argument. They were testament. I was the first witness. The future stretched before me, a path of thorns. Thorne had said the Prometheus Protocol was keyed to my DNA. I was the only one. But the protocol also created a blueprint. With my blood, my unique biological signature now altered, Thorne could synthesize a universal catalyst. He could create a way to give this choice to everyone. The world would brand me a monster, a terrorist to the flesh, the man who brought back pain. They would hunt me. They would try to cure me. They would fight to protect their sterile paradise. The coming war would not be fought with weapons, but with ideas, with sensation itself. It would be a battle for the soul of our species. And I would be alone, the first man in a new age of feeling, surrounded by a world of ghosts. But as I looked at Kale's bewildered face, a new feeling rose up through the pain and grief. It was fierce and protective, a warmth that spread through my chest, more powerful than the heat of the echo chamber. It was empathy. True, painful, profound empathy. I wasn't just sad for my own loss. I was sad for him, for his emptiness, for all that he was missing and didn't even know it. I reached out, my hand trembling, and placed it on his shoulder, the same spot where he had clapped me in friendly ignorance countless times. But this gesture was different. It was weighted with everything I now felt. I didn't do this to hurt you, Kale, I said, my voice soft. I did this to save you. A single tear, a drop of salt and sorrow in life, spilled from my eye and traced a path through the grime on my cheek. It fell, a tiny dark speck, onto the pristine white floor between us. It was the first real tear the world had seen in 300 years. A tiny, insignificant drop that held the weight of a lost ocean. It was a promise of rain after a long drought, a harbinger of floods to come. I did not know if humanity would choose to follow me out of the garden. I did not know if they would thank me or crucify me. I only knew that I had made a choice. I had chosen the fire. I had chosen the heartbreak. I had chosen the exquisite, terrible, beautiful burden of being human. And as I stood there, broken and weeping and more alive than I had ever been, I felt not an ending, but a beginning. The beginning of pain. The beginning of joy. The beginning of everything. My name is Elias, and I am the first to remember. The question is, will I be the last?